My father, may his memory be blessed, grew up during the Depression in a household that was economically insecure, and I'm guessing also food insecure as well, given the way my father related to food, eating as if a pack of wolves was after him, and his food every time he sat down to a meal. By the time the rest of us were just getting started, he had finished. And even though I grew up in a fairly comfortable home in Brooklyn, in a nice house in Midwood, in a nice neighborhood deep in Jewish Brooklyn, near Brooklyn College, and my parents sent me to a Jewish private school, and we went on nice family vacations, my father always felt that he never had enough, that others had more than him, and that compared to his friends and acquaintances, he felt like nothing. Somehow with him, it was always a zero-sum game. If they had, he didn't. This was especially true of a family that lived down the block from us, the Habers, the Syrian Jewish equivalent of the Joneses. They lived in a big house on the corner, much bigger than ours, and they kept building extensions. Each year there's more scaffolding and another extension, expanding the dimensions of their house to the capacity of that corner. There seemed to be no limit to the fortunes of the Haber family. To my father, the Habers had everything, and he had nothing. And to be fair, in the Syrian Jewish community where I grew up, in a community of giants in real estate and retail, people who regularly made the business news, my father was not a giant. He was just a regular guy making a comfortable living for his family. Successful by all objective counts, but that success did not make a dent in his consciousness. No matter what, despite all appearances to the contrary, deprivation ruled his inner world. In this week's portion, the feeling of not having enough is front and center. Rav lachem, you have too much, thunders Korach, Moshe's cousin, along with his followers, ganging up on Moshe and Aaron. Rav lachem, ki kol ha'eda kulam kedoshim, u'b'telcham Adonai, u'madua titnasu al kahal Adonai. You have too much, Korach and his men say, for the entire community, the entirety of them are holy, and in their midst is God. And why do you exalt yourselves over the assembly of God? Korach casts his complaint in terms of egalitarianism. The entire community is holy. So why should anyone raise themselves up above another? Why should Moshe and Aaron have so much power, so much recognition? But generations of rabbis are skeptical of Korach's commitment to equality. And so am I. And for good reason. They explain that Korach puts his claim of egalitarianism in the present. The entire community is holy now. But what does God say to God's people? Kedoshim to you. Become holy, for I, God your Lord, am holy. Ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. Holiness is not automatic according to the Torah. It's a divine injunction. We are not automatically holy. We have to strive to be holy through ethical and ritual commandments. But Korach is using this principle as a strategy to raise himself up. So if that's the case, what is this conflict really about? What's he so mad about? The ancient rabbis in a midrash, in a legend, explain that Korach was jealous because he believed that out of all the cousins, he was next in line for elevation to princely status. Instead, a different cousin of Moshe, one whose father was junior to Korach's father in the paternal sibling order, became prince. So Korach said to himself, I'm going to start a fight with Moshe and nullify everything he has accomplished. I'm going to make him nothing. This fits well into a well-known trope in the Torah. The elder passed over for the younger, and naturally, the elder becomes consumed with jealousy. Korach is in a rage because he does not have the status he feels he rightly deserves. This dynamic is, of course, a strain in both senses of the word, moving throughout the Torah. Brothers jealous of each other, sisters jealous of each other, wives jealous of each other, a cousin jealous of another cousin, a king jealous of another who threatens his position, constant tensions and entanglements, and even worse, violence, jealousy and feeling less than characterize the entire biblical narrative. Starting, of course, with the two first brothers, Cain and Abel. God prefers Abel's offering to Cain's. And Cain, of course, was terribly jealous. So jealous that what does he do? He kills his brother. He murders, nullifying his brother's power or God's favoritism by killing him. And yet, of course, it's problematic for God to prefer the offering of one brother over another. And so perhaps God is not innocent here of playing favorites. But if we look more closely at who Cain and Abel are, we may understand why God prefers Abel's offering. Abel's name in Hebrew is Hevel. We can call him Vapor Man. He is the person that understands deeply that life is fleeting, and perhaps even that our very egos are illusory. And Cain, is the man who grasps. His name is related to the verb liknot, to acquire. Cain is the acquisitive one. And if you look closely at the text, you see that Hevel, the shepherd, offers the very best of what he has to God. Cain gives a regular old offering. So it makes sense that God would prefer Hevel's offering to Cain's. Amazingly enough, the Kabbalah, the mystical tradition, sees Cain and Abel reincarnated in Korach and Moshe. The one who grasps, Korach, and the one who is like vapor, Moshe. Think about it. It makes sense. Korach, like Cain, is defined by grasping. He wants more. He tries to grasp what Moshe has. And Moshe, on the other hand, the Torah tells us, is the most humble man on earth. It's not about him or his status. While he is a leader, the Torah describes him as a servant of God, Eved LaAdonai. He does not center his ego. He, like Hevel, is like vapor. Korach, in sharp contrast to his cousin, wants to take. That is why his story begins with the words, Vayikach Korach. And Korach took. The very strange thing is that verb to take has no object. We don't know what Korach takes, because Korach just wants to take and take and take. He simply wants, like Cain, to take, to acquire. Korach, one could say, is grasping at nothing because he himself feels like he's nothing. And it's not, mind you, that Korach didn't have. Interestingly enough, the ancient rabbis tell us he was a rich guy. Now, when you think about it, they're in the wilderness. How did they become rich? Well, they despoiled, right, the Egyptians, but even more than that, the ancient rabbis tell us on his way out of Egypt, he discovered all kinds of treasure that Joseph hid of silver and gold. To this very day, in contemporary Hebrew, there's a saying, rich like Korach, ashir kakorach. So he has a reputation that transcends the wilderness generation till now for his wealth. And Cain, too, like Korach, was not a man who had nothing. He had the fruits of his labor. But he felt that God's preference for his brother's offering so painfully that he felt like he had nothing and flew into a murderous rage. 3 men, my father, Korach, and Cain, each of them had something, and each of them felt like nothing. In Pirkei Avot, in the wisdom of the fathers, we are taught what it really means to be wealthy, the kind of wealth that goes beyond material goods. It is written, Ezahu Ashir, who is wealthy, who is rich? Hasameach b'chalko, the one who is happy with their portion. My friend and study partner, Rabbi Sharon Cohn-Annisfeld, comments on this line from Pirkei Avot in a sermon. She says, the word for portion, chelek, in Hebrew and in English has a dual connotation. One portion refers to our particular destiny in life, the blessing and burdens that we have received. Our lot, our portion. It is particular to us, and in this sense, it is by definition partial. We're only part of a much larger picture. But once we embrace this perspective, humility gives birth to the joy of purpose and belonging. It is only when we learn to befriend our own partialness that we can truly rejoice in being part of a whole that embraces and connects us all. Understanding that each of us is partial, is just a part, can serve as a kind of medicine, a tonic, for the consciousness of deprivation. Yesterday, on Independence Day, I meditated on the idea of independence. It seems to me to imply that each of us is an entire world in ourselves, that we are complete unto ourselves, that we are detached from each other. I believe this is an illusion, one that can bring out deeply negative aspects of American individualism, a character trait that we are often proud of, but that can become destructive in action. Independence obscures the truth that we are radically dependent, each of us on the other, that we are uncomfortably and inescapably partial. Perhaps instead of relieving that discomfort through self-improvement, trying to perfect ourselves and becoming better and better, desperately trying to insulate ourselves from our own vulnerability, maybe we can relieve our discomfort by giving ourselves more fully to the communities we belong to, by offering ourselves to each other, to a greater whole, to the sacred enterprise of the collective, by being willing to be partial and knowing that others around us are essential parts that complete us. I'm afraid that grasping, that constant seeking after status and stature always leaves us feeling unworthy. And it's created a culture of atomization, of disconnection, one of protecting my turf with everything I have from the other, even with lies, even with violence, because you're threatening me simply by being who you are. At this moment, when we celebrate independence, I bless all of us that we move towards interdependence. to the knowledge that we are all part of one brilliant whole, a multicolored, interwoven tapestry. May that be healing for us. May it heal this wonderful, terrible, imperiled country that we live in. Who is wealthy? The one who is joyful in their portion. The one who finds joy in being partial. Ezehu Ashir, Hasameach B'chalko.